Colby, why are you standing there like that?
Because I finally read your messages.
The garage door rattled like a broken promise as I heard Nira's car pull into our driveway. Midnight again. Third time this week. I glanced at my watch and shook my head, tightening the wrench on my motorcycle's engine. At least the Harley was honest about its problems. "Colby, you still up?" Her voice drifted through the house, sweet as artificial honey. I wiped my hands on an old rag and stepped into the kitchen. There she stood, my wife of 16 years, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine shoot. Her auburn hair was perfectly tousled, makeup still flawless despite the late hour. The only tell was the lingering scent of expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "Working late again?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Nira kicked off her designer heels and stretched like a cat. "You know how it is at OmniMuse. The creative process doesn't follow a 9-to-5 schedule. Pierce and Kai had this amazing breakthrough on the Morrison campaign, and we just couldn't stop the flow." Pierce Eldro and Kai Dornell, her creative partners. I'd met them at company parties, all handshakes and hollow smiles. Pierce with his perfectly styled beard and vintage band t-shirts that probably cost more than my monthly gym membership fees. Kai with his trust fund confidence and habit of calling everything revolutionary. "Must be some breakthrough," I said, noticing the slight smudge of lipstick on her collar. "What time did you guys wrap up?" "Oh, you know how time flies when you're in the zone. We're like this perfect creative triangle. They call me their muse." She said it with a little laugh, like she was auditioning for a commercial. I guess Van Gogh's muse also came home with someone else's cologne on her clothes, except he only lost his ear. I was losing my mind. "Dad?" Tabby appeared at the top of the stairs, our 15-year-old daughter with her mother's sharp features and my stubborn streak. "Everything okay down there?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart," Nira called up. "Just telling your father about my exciting day." Tabby gave us both a look that suggested she wasn't buying it, then disappeared back to her room. Smart kid, probably already texting her friends about the latest installment of her parents' midnight drama. After Nira headed upstairs for her shower, I stood in the kitchen feeling like a stranger in my own house. This was Haverton, the kind of post-industrial river city where everyone knew everyone's business. Half the downtown was still boarded up from the factory closures, but the other half had been gentrified into art galleries and organic coffee shops. Perfect place for creative types to reinvent themselves. I'd been reinventing myself too, in my own way. 5 years ago, I'd left the fire department after a back injury and used my savings to buy the old Iron Foundry Gym. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Real people, real sweat, real results. No creative triangles or artistic breakthroughs required. The next morning, I was reviewing membership renewals when Brickman walked into my office. Mason Brickman, former police detective turned personal trainer, was the kind of guy who made problems disappear just by existing in the same room. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," he said, settling his massive frame into the chair across from my desk. "Nira's working late again. Creative emergencies, apparently." Brick raised an eyebrow. "Creative emergencies at midnight? That's some dedication to the arts." "She says they call her their muse." "Muse, huh?" Brick cracked his knuckles. "In my experience, when guys start calling a married woman their muse, they're usually inspired by more than her creative input." I wanted to defend my wife, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I pulled out my phone to check our family calendar. That's when I saw it. Our shared tablet had synced with Nira's messages. The group chat was labeled Creative Triangle. The messages made my stomach drop. "Pierce, can't wait for tonight's session. You inspire us in ways you can't imagine." Kai, "Our muse deserves special treatment. I've got the champagne ready." Nira, "You two know exactly how to make a girl feel appreciated. See you at the usual spot." I scrolled through more messages, timestamps that didn't match her stories. Photos that definitely weren't from any office I'd ever seen. Security logs from OmniMuse showed badge swipes that contradicted every late-night excuse she'd given me. "Brick," I said, my voice steady despite the storm building inside me. "How well do you know Pierce Eldro and Kai Dornell?" "Eldro's married to that sharp lawyer, Zara something. Dornell's got the socialite wife, Helena. Why?" I turned my phone toward him. Brick read for a moment, his expression darkening. "Well," he said finally, "looks like your wife's been providing some very hands-on creative direction." The next part happened fast, like a controlled explosion. I called Zara Eldro first. Her voice was crisp, professional, the kind that cut through nonsense like a scalpel. "Mrs. Eldro, this is Colby Varon, Nira's husband. I think we need to talk." 30 minutes later, I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown with two women I barely knew, sharing the kind of evidence that destroys marriages. Zara Eldro was exactly what you'd expect from a successful attorney: sharp suit, sharper eyes, and the kind of controlled fury that could level buildings. Helena Dornell surprised me. Beneath her perfectly styled exterior was a shrewd intelligence that had probably been underestimated by every man she'd ever met. "These timestamps," Zara said, studying the messages on my phone. "Pierce told me he was working on a solo project those nights. Said he needed space to think." Helena's laugh was bitter. "Kai's been coming home with stories about late-night brainstorming sessions. Said they were developing something revolutionary that would change the industry." "They weren't lying," I said. "They were developing something, just not what they told us." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. We drove to OmniMuse in Helena's pristine BMW, three betrayed spouses united by a common purpose. The building was one of those converted warehouses that screamed creative space, exposed brick, industrial lighting, and enough artistic pretension to choke a gallery curator. If this was a movie, I muttered as we parked, we'd crash through the lobby and catch them in the act. In reality, we're probably going to stand around looking pale and awkward while they explain this away. But as we approached the glass entrance, we could see lights on in the main conference room, silhouettes moving behind frosted glass. The security desk was empty, convenient for people who needed privacy for their creative sessions. Zara had her phone out, recording everything. Helena was taking photos. I just stood there, watching my marriage disintegrate in real time through a conference room window. The scene inside was exactly what you'd expect, and somehow worse than I'd imagined. Nira wasn't just their muse, she was their entertainment, their inspiration, their after-hours amenity. The creative triangle had angles I'd never considered. "Got enough evidence?" I whispered. "More than enough," Zara replied, her lawyer instincts in full gear. "This isn't just adultery. It's workplace misconduct, misuse of company property, and probably a dozen HR violations." Helena was already on her phone, texting someone. "I know a journalist who specializes in corporate scandals. She'll be here in 20 minutes. That's when things got interesting. Nira tried to send a text, probably another alibi selfie to cover her tracks. But the timestamps on the security footage, the messages we'd already captured, and the very obvious evidence of what they'd been doing made any excuse impossible. Within an hour, the OmniMuse lobby looked like a crime scene. Journalists, police, and curious onlookers filled the space. I watched through the glass as Nira, wrapped in someone's jacket, tried to explain herself to a detective who looked like she'd heard every story twice. Pierce and Kai emerged from the elevator looking like deer in headlights. That's when I made my move. "Gentlemen," I said, stepping into their path, "having a creative evening?" Pierce tried to brush past me. "This is a misunderstanding, Colby. We can explain everything." I didn't move. "I'm sure you can. You're creative types, after all." Very inspiring work you've been doing. Kai, clearly the weaker of the two, started stammering about artistic collaboration and professional relationships. I placed my hand on his chest, not violent, just firm enough to stop him from walking away. Here's to creative thinking, I said, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. Maybe you'll get your own reality show. I hear Orange is very inspiring. The lobby had filled with phones and cameras. Every word, every gesture was being recorded for posterity. Social media gold in the making. Pierce tried to play the victim card. You're being unreasonable, Colby. This is harassment. Harassment? I laughed. I'm just appreciating your artistic process. Very hands-on approach to creative direction. That's when Tabby's first post went live. I saw it on someone's phone screen. My mom, the muse, guess she inspired the whole city tonight. The kid had inherited her mother's timing and my sense of sarcasm. Dangerous combination. As the police led the creative triangle away for questioning, I stood in that lobby surrounded by cameras and curious faces and made a decision. They wanted a villain? They wanted drama? I'd give them a performance they'd never forget. But first, I needed to go home and figure out exactly how deep this inspiration had gone. The next morning, Iron Foundry Gym felt like a sanctuary. Real people, real problems, real solutions. No creative triangles or artistic emergencies, just iron and sweat and the honest work of building something stronger than you were yesterday. But sanctuary doesn't last long in a town like Haverton, especially when your personal life becomes public entertainment. Colby! Mrs. Caspar from next door cornered me in the parking lot. I saw the news. That poor Nira, having her private life exposed like that. Poor Nira. Right, the victim of her own creative process. It's a difficult time, Mrs. Caspar, I said, trying to get past her without being rude. You men never understand the pressure women face in creative industries. Sometimes they have to make compromises. Compromises. That's what we were calling it now. Inside the gym, the atmosphere was different. Some clients avoided eye contact, others stared too long. The story had legs, and everyone wanted to see how the wronged husband would handle his 15 minutes of infamy. Brick found me in my office, scrolling through social media posts about the scandal. The creative triangle had become Haverton's hottest gossip, complete with hashtags and think pieces about modern relationships. Nira's fighting back, he said, showing me his phone. Claims you're controlling, jealous, abusive. Says she was seeking emotional support from colleagues because of problems at home. I read her statement, posted on every platform she could find. According to my wife of 16 years, I was a possessive monster who drove her to seek comfort elsewhere. The creative triangle became her escape from domestic oppression. She's good, I admitted. Turn the cheaters into victims, make the betrayed husband the villain, classic misdirection. Some people are buying it, Brick said. Lost 3 clients this morning. They said they don't feel comfortable around someone with anger issues. Anger issues. Because discovering your wife's extracurricular activities and exposing them publicly was apparently a character flaw. That afternoon, I got a call from Mira Chen, one of Nira's co-workers at OmniMuse. We'd met at company parties, but she'd never called me before. Colby, we need to talk. There's more to this story than you know. We met at a diner on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where conversations stayed private and the coffee was strong enough to wake the conscience. Mira slid a manila envelope across the table. Your wife wasn't just having an affair, she said. She was planning your destruction. The documents inside made my stomach turn. Email chains discussing my psychological instability. Plans to document abusive behavior that could be used in divorce proceedings. Financial projections showing how much Nira could get with the right legal strategy. They called it Project Liberation, Mira explained. Pierce and Kai were helping her build a case for an abusive marriage. The affairs were just bonus entertainment. Why are you showing me this? Mira's smile was sharp as broken glass. Because Nira stole my promotion 6 months ago, took credit for my work on the Morrison campaign, and convinced management I was difficult to work with. I've been waiting for the right moment to return the favor. Revenge served cold, with a side of corporate politics. I could appreciate the artistry. What do you want in return? Nothing from you. Watching Nira's world collapse is payment enough. I studied the documents, seeing my marriage from a completely different angle. Every late night, every creative emergency, every moment I'd questioned my own sanity, it had all been part of a larger plan. There's more, Nira said, pulling out her phone. Audio recordings from their planning sessions. Turns out the conference room wasn't the only place they got creative. The recordings were devastating. Nira's voice, clear and calculating, discussing how to document my aggressive behavior and emotional instability. Pierce and Kai offering suggestions, treating my destruction like another creative project. We'll need incidents, Nira's voice said. Things we can point to as patterns of abuse. Colby's got that firefighter background. We can play up the trauma angle, make him seem unstable. What about your daughter? Kai's voice asked. Tabby's 15, old enough to testify about her father's behavior if we frame it right. That was the line they shouldn't have crossed. Planning to destroy me was one thing. Involving my daughter was something else entirely. I looked across the table at Nira, this woman who'd just handed me nuclear weapons disguised as manila folders. They have no idea you're sharing this? None. They think I'm on Nira's side, helping with damage control from the scandal. And you're willing to testify to the authenticity of these recordings? Absolutely. I recorded them myself. I gathered the documents and stood up. Nira, you might have just saved my life. Don't thank me yet, she said. Thank me after you've used them. That evening, I sat in my garage with the evidence spread across my workbench like blueprints for demolition. Project Liberation was about to become Project Retaliation. But first, I needed to make a few phone calls. The next phase required precision. Emotional satisfaction was tempting, but strategic thinking would be more effective. I'd learned that much from 20 years of marriage to a woman who planned everything 3 moves ahead. First call went to my lawyer, Janet Morrison. Not the most creative name for someone handling the Morrison campaign fallout, but life has a sense of humor about these things. Janet, I need to move fast on asset protection, and I have some interesting evidence to share. How interesting? The kind that turns a messy divorce into a slam dunk. Second call went to Detective Lila Griggs, who'd handled the initial investigation at OmniMuse. She was the type of cop who appreciated thorough documentation and airtight cases. Detective, I have additional evidence related to the OmniMuse incident. Audio recordings that suggest premeditated fraud and conspiracy. Bring them in. If they're authentic, this case just got a lot more interesting. Third call was the most important. Helena Dornell answered on the first ring. Colby, how are you holding up? Better than expected. Listen, are you and Zara available for coffee? I have updates on our mutual problem. An hour later, we were back in the same diner where Nira had handed me the keys to my wife's kingdom. Zara listened to the recordings with the focused intensity of a surgeon, while Helena took notes like she was planning a military campaign. This changes everything, Zara said when the audio finished. This isn't just adultery anymore. It's conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, and probably extortion. Helena was already on her phone. My journalist contact is going to love this. Corporate scandal becomes criminal conspiracy? That's front-page material. Wait, I said. Before we go public, I want to handle a few things privately. The beauty of having evidence is that you control the timing of its release. Nira, Pierce, and Kai were operating under the assumption that their planning sessions were secret. They had no idea their entire conspiracy was documented and ready for broadcast. I started small. Called OmniMuse's parent company and shared the recordings with their legal department. Within hours, all 3 conspirators were suspended pending investigation. Nira's attempts to play victim suddenly looked less convincing when corporate lawyers got involved. Next, I visited Kai's luxury car dealership. His father owned the business, and family reputation mattered in their social circle. I didn't slash tires or key paint jobs. I did something worse. I shared the audio recordings with his father. "Mr. Dornell, I thought you should know what your son has been doing with company resources and family money." The conversation was brief. By evening, Kai's social media accounts were deactivated, and his trust fund was frozen pending family review. Pierce was trickier. His reputation was built on creative integrity and artistic vision. Hard to maintain that image when audio recordings reveal you plotting to destroy someone's life for entertainment. I sent the recordings to his biggest clients, along with a simple note. "Thought you should know about Pierce Eldrow's creative process." 3 clients terminated their contracts within 24 hours, but the real masterpiece was still coming. That weekend, Haverton hosted its annual River Arts Festival. Normally, I'd skip the pretentious celebration of local creativity, but this year felt different. This year, I had something to contribute to the artistic conversation. The festival featured a main stage where local artists shared their work and vision. Pierce had been scheduled to speak about authentic creative collaboration before his recent legal troubles. The spot was still open. I called the festival organizer and volunteered to fill the gap. "I'm Colby Varon," I said. "You might have seen me in the news recently. I'd like to share my perspective on creative partnerships and authentic collaboration." "Mr. Varon, I'm not sure that's appropriate given the current situation. I think the community deserves to hear all sides of the story, especially the authentic parts." The festival organizer agreed, probably hoping for drama that would boost attendance. She had no idea how much drama I was prepared to deliver. Saturday afternoon, I stood on the main stage looking out at a crowd of Haverton's creative class. Artists, writers, musicians, and the kind of people who used words like authentic and transformative without irony. "Good afternoon," I began. "I'm here to talk about inspiration, creativity, and the difference between art and performance." In the crowd, I could see Nira with her supporters, probably expecting me to embarrass myself with some bitter rant about betrayal and revenge. Instead, I told a story. 6 months ago, my wife and her creative partners began an ambitious project. They called it Project Liberation. It was going to be their masterpiece, a complete transformation of reality through careful planning and artistic vision. I had their attention now. The crowd sensed something bigger than a typical festival presentation. The project involved detailed character development, careful documentation, and a complex narrative structure. They created recordings, gathered evidence, and built a compelling story about domestic abuse, psychological instability, and the need for liberation from an oppressive relationship. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Some people were reaching for their phones. It was brilliant work, really. Creative, thorough, and completely fictional. They documented planning sessions, discussed strategy, and even involved other family members in their artistic vision. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the sound system. "I'd like to share some of their creative process with you. Consider it a behind-the-scenes look at contemporary collaborative art." The first recording played across the festival grounds, Nira's voice clear and calculating as she discussed fabricating evidence of abuse. The crowd went silent, then restless, then angry. I played 3 more recordings, each one more damaging than the last. By the time I finished, Nira and her supporters had disappeared from the crowd. "That's authentic collaboration," I concluded, "when people work together to create something that serves their vision, regardless of who gets hurt in the process." The applause was scattered and uncomfortable, but I didn't care. I'd said what needed saying. As I left the stage, my phone was already buzzing with messages. The recordings were being shared, discussed, and analyzed across every social platform in town. Project Liberation had become Project Exposure, and the Creative Triangle was about to discover what happens when the audience sees behind the curtain. The festival recording went viral within hours. Not just locally, the story of the Creative Triangle's conspiracy reached regional news, then national blogs, then social media platforms, where justice-hungry audiences dissected every detail. Nira tried damage control, claiming the recordings were taken out of context, that she'd been joking, that I'd manipulated the evidence somehow. But audio doesn't lie, and context only made her words more damaging. Pierce and Kai went silent, their lawyers probably advising them to avoid any public statements. Smart move, but too late to matter. The real fallout came Tuesday morning when Detective Griggs called with an update. "Colby, we've reviewed all the evidence you provided. The district attorney is filing charges for conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, and filing false police reports. Your wife and her partners are looking at serious legal consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "Felony charges. Possible prison time. Definitely career ending for all three of them." I should have felt satisfied, but mostly I felt empty. 16 years of marriage reduced to evidence folders and criminal charges. That afternoon, Tabby came home from school with red eyes and a defiant expression. "Everyone's talking about it," she said. "About Mom, about you, about everything. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this." "Are you really?" Her voice was sharp, angry. "Because it seems like you're enjoying destroying Mom's life." I sat down across from her, trying to find words that wouldn't sound like justification or self-pity. "Your mother and her friends were planning to destroy my life, Tabby. They were going to use you as a witness to testify about abuse that never happened. They recorded planning sessions where they discussed how to manipulate you into supporting their story." She stared at me, processing information that no 15-year-old should have to handle. "I never would have testified against you." "I know. But they thought they could convince you to, and they were willing to try." Tabby was quiet for a long moment, then asked the question I'd been dreading. "What happens now?" "Now we figure out how to move forward." But moving forward proved complicated. Nira's legal troubles made her desperate, and desperate people make dangerous choices. Thursday evening, I was closing up the gym when Pierce Eldro appeared in the parking lot. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past week, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing clothes that suggested he'd been sleeping in his car. "Colby, we need to talk. I think your lawyer would advise against that." "My lawyer fired me. Can't afford the retainer anymore." Pierce stepped closer, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. "You've destroyed everything. My marriage, my career, my reputation. Was it worth it?" "You destroyed your own life, Pierce. I just made sure people knew about it." "We could have worked something out, kept it quiet, handled it privately." "Like you handled Project Liberation privately?" Pierce's face twisted with rage and desperation. "That was Nira's idea. We just went along with it. You went along with planning to destroy my life and traumatize my daughter. That was your choice." He lunged forward, swinging wildly. I'd been expecting something like this. Desperate men do predictable things. I stepped aside, let his momentum carry him past me, then grabbed his arm and used his own weight to put him face first against my truck. "Pierce, you're drunk and making bad decisions. Go home." "I don't have a home anymore. Zara took everything." "Then go to a hotel, but if you come near me or my family again, I'll have you arrested for harassment." I released him and stepped back. Pierce straightened his clothes, trying to salvage some dignity from the situation. "This isn't over, Colby." "Yes, it is. You just haven't accepted it yet." He stumbled back to his car, and I watched him drive away with the careful precision of someone who knows they're too impaired to be driving. Friday morning brought news that Pierce had been arrested for driving under the influence, his second offense, which meant mandatory jail time and license suspension. The creative triangle was collapsing under the weight of their own choices, but the final act was still coming. Saturday night, Haverton's downtown hosted a charity gala for the Arts Council. Normally, I'd avoid that kind of pretentious gathering, but this year felt different. This year, I had unfinished business. The gala was held in the renovated warehouse district, the same neighborhood where OmniMuse had their offices. Irony has a sense of location. I arrived alone, wearing my best suit and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you've already won. The crowd was the usual mix of local artists, business leaders, and people who attended charity events to be seen supporting worthy causes. Nira was there, of course. She'd managed to find supporters who believed her version of events, people who saw her as a victim of vindictive masculine revenge. She looked elegant and fragile, playing her role perfectly. When she saw me across the room, her composure cracked for just a moment. Then she recovered, surrounded herself with sympathetic friends, and continued her performance. The evening's program included speeches from local artists and community leaders. I hadn't planned to speak, but sometimes opportunities present themselves. During the open microphone portion, I walked to the podium. Good evening. I'm Colby Varon, and I'd like to share some thoughts about truth, creativity, and consequences. The room went quiet. Everyone knew who I was and why my presence was significant. 6 months ago, I discovered that people I trusted were planning to destroy my life through creative storytelling. They were going to use fiction, disguised as truth, to take everything I'd worked for and damage my relationship with my daughter. I could see Nira in the crowd, her face pale but defiant. Tonight, I want to share the final chapter of their story. I pulled out an envelope and opened it slowly, deliberately. This is a DNA test, I said. For the past 15 years, I've loved and raised Tabby Varon as my daughter. Recently, I began to question whether that relationship was as real as I believed. The room was completely silent now. Even the waiters had stopped moving. The results confirm what I hoped. Tabby is my biological daughter, but for the past week, I've let my wife and daughter wonder about the results, let them worry about what this test might reveal. I looked directly at Nira. That's what uncertainty feels like. That's what it's like to have someone you trust threaten the foundation of your family. I folded the test results and put them back in the envelope. The difference is, my uncertainty was based on their documented conspiracy to destroy my life. Their uncertainty was based on consequences they created for themselves. I stepped away from the microphone and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear whispers and movement as the crowd processed what they'd just witnessed. In the parking lot, Nira caught up with me. "How could you do that?" she demanded. "How could you let Tabby think you might not be her father? The same way you could plan to use her as a witness against me in a fabricated abuse case. That was different. We were protecting ourselves. From what? A marriage you could have ended honestly anytime you wanted?" She didn't have an answer for that. "It's over, Nira. The conspiracy, the lies, the creative triangle, all of it. You made choices, and now you live with consequences. What about Tabby? What about our family? You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy it for your artistic vision." I got in my truck and drove away, leaving my wife standing in the parking lot of her own final performance. 6 months later, Pierce and Kai were serving prison sentences for conspiracy and fraud. Nira had accepted a plea deal that included probation, community service, and restitution payments that would keep her financially struggling for years. OmniMuse had folded, its reputation destroyed by the scandal. The creative triangle had become a cautionary tale about the difference between inspiration and manipulation. Tabby and I were rebuilding our relationship, learning to trust each other again after months of uncertainty and public humiliation. She'd started working part-time at the gym, discovering that real strength comes from honest effort, not creative storytelling. Iron Foundry Gym was thriving. Turns out people respect someone who fights back against injustice, even when the methods are unconventional. I never saw Nira again after that night in the parking lot. She moved to another city, trying to rebuild her life away from the wreckage of her creative ambitions. Sometimes I wonder if she learned anything from the experience, if she understands the difference between inspiration and destruction. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. The muse's curse was broken. The creative triangle had collapsed under its own contradictions, and I was finally free to build something real.